We never know where life will lead us or what may hinder us along the way. But while every day can feel like one big question mark, it doesn't have to. With the right insights, strategies, and solutions from Western and Southern Financial Group, together we can look ahead to leave the unknown behind.
What's pro football focus doing? Last week they had Brady. This week they got Brady.
We're literally doing it differently from everybody else.
As a matter of fact, moving forward from this point on, I will not make reference to PFF.
Ready to get into it?
Yeah.
All right. We're going team by team.
I would be very careful about slinging stone.
Am I going to get sued?
We got legal on this?
I like football season, and all the things that go with it.
Welcome into the PFF NFL podcast. Steve Palazzolo, Sam Monson. We're live-ish on YouTube, breaking down the AFC. We're going to fix every AFC team. We should put that in the title just to really hook people. Fixing every AFC team today.
With an old legend.
With a legend.
Of that team. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
but not like the current version of the legend.
No. So it's like a fantasy draft, right? You get to pick a former team legend from history to add to the current roster to make them better, to fix them for the current NFL season. I'm excited by this. It was a cool idea. And then when I started actually doing it, I was like, no, this is actually fun. I went through team by team. It's difficult for some teams. It's very easy for some other teams. But I'm excited by this.
So we're going to go team by team.
Yep.
We'll start in the AFC today, NFC tomorrow. And we're going to fix every team.
So I had a few vague rules to this, right? The guy you're adding can't still be an active player. So the Packers can't just put Rodgers back on the team. The theory being that you're getting like the prime version of that guy, right? So the Packers can't just like bring Rodgers back because he's still active. To me, the guy had to have played the majority or at least a recognizable significant portion of his career for that team. So, for example, Reggie White, eligible for both the Packers or the Eagles, not the Panthers, you know?
Can he be on both the Packers and the Eagles?
No, we could argue that out.
First come, first serve?
Right. I only did it for one team. I didn't double up adding the same guy to multiple spots.
So Panthers legend Reggie White, ineligible.
Not a thing. And then I tried generally to avoid people that retired like, a year ago. I felt that
Tom Brady, ineligible. Gronk, ineligible.
Yeah, I felt that wasn't really in the spirit of it. But we may get to some where it's just you kind of need to make that happen, so we can argue those when we get to them. But those are my general rules of thumb.
You know what my general rule is?
You want to stick to like things that happened in living memory because you're useless.
I'm not great with really, really, long NFL history.
Are you one of these people?
No, I spent all of my days understanding everything about baseball history. Like I can recite Wade Boggs' batting average for every single season in the 80s, in which years he won the batting title. I have a ridiculous, uncanny knowledge of baseball history and stats and wrestling in the 80s and 90s. Okay? That's where a lot of my brain capacity went during these days where I was not trying to go back and understand the NFL from the 50s and 60s. Because, let's be honest, it did look like a completely different game from what we grew up with.
Is your brain like a hoarder's basement where you just have reams of crap that's utterly useless now?
Oh, so much.
Yeah.
So much.
Are you one of these people generally that like believes that Don Hudson doesn't exist because if you put him in today's NFL, he would look like me?
No, I don't believe that.
Good.
But again, I don't, because baseball has these same debates. Like Babe Ruth could never play today. It's like, all right, sure, but he probably could.
Right.
So like I don't even. Let's not even play that game.
Well,
let's assume that these guys, that Don Hudson's good.
Yes. Let's at least address that argument because it always frustrates me a little bit and strikes me as kind of silly. Like if you transported Don Hudson from whenever he was playing, the 30s, the 40s, whatever the hell it was, to today's NFL and like put him next to Julio Jones in in receiving one-on-ones, rep 1 Julio Jones, rep 2 Don Hudson, of course he'd look ridiculous. But I think you have to work on the basis of if you are magically transporting this guy from the deep past to the modern NFL, you would also have to assume that he gets the modern NFL's benefit of nutrition, sports science, throughout his life up until this point, right? So it's Don Hutson adjusted for inflation. It's Deacon Jones adjusted for inflation and modern science, not the dude literally ripped out of the fabric of the past and thrown onto the NFL field in 2023.
Yeah, that's all fair. The thing I would argue too about the old time NFL players, you didn't grow up here, but I would argue that the average American sports fan knows way more about historic baseball players than NFL players. Baseball is more of an historic type of game. So if we were having this debate and I was like, I'm going to add Willie Mays and Stan Musial and Rogers Hornsby, I feel like the average fan has like an idea about those players more than they do the Don Hudsons of the world. So I don't think I'm biased in that opinion because that's me. I think that's more the average sports fan. So there's more people who know baseball history because it is part of nostalgia. People know Jackie Robinson far more than they know.
Looking down my list generally, it does skew more modern. I mean, I think that's natural just from our age.
I wanted to lean toward the 80s and 90s the most.
Yeah. So, I mean, look, we can do it either way. You can argue for your guys that retired last season. And
I don't want to do retired last season. I'm just saying 80s, 90s.
Yeah. I think we're going to skew towards that era anyway because neither of us are as old as some of these old-timers that, Hall of Fame debaters, et cetera, that will give you all chapter and verse about guys that played in the 1940s.
Right. I have one more rule.
Okay.
The PFF NFL podcast is sponsored by Western and Southern Financial Group.
It's a good rule.
While you focus on your roster moves, Western and Southern helps advance your money moves. Buying your first home, planning to start a family, wondering how to make your money grow? Western and Southern's playbook of life insurance, investment, and retirement solutions helps you rest assured on game day. Team up to understand needs and address goals with a game plan built just for you. Get started at westernsouthern.com/PFF. We mentioned on yesterday's show, while wearing the same exact clothes and the same exact seats, a potential fantasy draft in the future. I'm getting more and more excited about this.
About the expansion draft idea.
What did I say? Expansion draft.
It is a fantasy draft.
Expansion draft. You and I are going to simulate an entire offseason with the available players in an expansion draft if the 32 current NFL teams had to expose those players to the expansion draft, and then you and I got to go into the NFL draft itself with 7 picks and make our picks. I actually I got a little program for that.
What?
I can automate what the draft model, who the draft model would draft at each pick for each team in each draft.
Huh. So you're actually going to draft along the model. You should actually be bound to do that. That should be a rule for you.
I think I'm going to.
You must draft according to the model.
And according to there's some rules around the model. It's not just like a linear. It's the best player who was drafted in that round or in that range, best player available in that range, basically, because I would take expected draft position into consideration. So, yeah, I'm excited about that. So we'll do that at some point in the future. All right, you want to do this?
Yeah.
AFC. Let's start in the West. Where's my list?
Let's start in the West. The West is where you're starting with this.
Yeah, because we always start in the East.
Okay.
So let's start with
Denver. Denver? Is that who's?
Denver Broncos.
There you go.
Let's do it.
Okay. Where do you want to start with your 80s and 90s?
I mean, you're going to give him John Elway, right?
You probably are, yeah. Now, look, there's some other interesting options. I do think, John Elway was my pick as well. The Denver Broncos could also add Champ Bailey. Champ Bailey next to Patrick Surtain as a cornerback duo? That's pretty feisty.
I can get behind that. How do we handle running backs here? Because you're going to want like Jim Brown and Terrell Davis.
There is one
Earl Campbell.
There is one running back in the entire NFL that I am willing to make an argument for. That's it. So that's how I'm handling the running back position.
Oh, it's the Lions, isn't it?
We'll get there.
They just drafted the next Barry Sanders, though.
So, Denver, Champ Bailey next to Patrick Surtain, I think would be pretty fun. Carl Mecklenburg, just because. You know what his nickname was?
Mech.
No. That would be a reasonable expectation and a solid nickname. But we're not in the realm of solid. We're in the realm of, I didn't know this, but this is right up there with Bad Moon for one of the best nicknames in NFL history. You know what it was?
What?
The Albino Rhino.
Albino?
Sure.
Albino Rhino.
Albino Rhino.
Now it rhymes.
Which does make rhyme now. But
there we go.
That's one of the greatest
The Albino
nicknames.
Rhino.
Yes.
Okay, that's pretty
That's
solid.
a phenomenal nickname. So for that reason alone, the man deserves back in the modern NFL.
Good research there.
Yeah. But I think John Elway probably is the pick. I would be fascinated to see John Elway in the modern NFL because his numbers kind of stink.
It really is two different games.
Yes, so he's a classic example of how hard it is to compare across eras, but it's also difficult to understand how much. So John Elway's numbers via most conventional means kind of stink.
All right,
but there was an acknowledgement.
I'm going to do some quick research.
Knock yourself
in
out.
Ultimate.
But there was an acknowledgement basically throughout the man's entire career that he was getting significantly more out of what was there than he had any right to. He was dragging these teams single-handedly to the Super Bowl where they would get owned by the 49ers. But he was doing that consistently. And then he finally got the 2 payoff rings at the end of his career and got the Super Bowl championships, and it was a happy ending and blah, blah, blah. But there's also the confounding element of he was also arguably the greatest quarterback prospect to enter the NFL ever. Right? He was the Trevor Lawrence of his time, the Andrew Luck, the guy that was unquestionably just this elite, perfect quarterback prospect. We know how much that kind of thing lingers in the NFL, like how hard it is to lose that respect or that status of being, an incredibly elite prospect. So how much of the John Elway so much better than his numbers and his performance suggests is true, and how much of it is just we know or we think of John Elway as this perfect quarterback prospect, therefore we have to say he's actually way better than his performances were. I think he's one of the most difficult quarterbacks in NFL history to fairly evaluate based off past evidence.
The more I watch football, first off, the more I think over time QB wins do matter. I do think that they do get you in the ballpark, right? Elway did. There was this element of him carrying those teams. The other part that is really tough to wrap your head around, so he completed 57% of his passes in his career. It was a completely different game. 7-step dropbacks.
Yeah.
Not just once in a while. Every single time.
Right.
There was no 3-step game. The 3-step game showed up with the West Coast offense in the early 80s with the 49ers, and only a handful of teams were running it. So it was look, Joe Montana was great and all that stuff, and Steve Young was great. But for about 15 years, they were running a completely different offense that was far more QB stat friendly. The Niners, the Packers, and Holmgren, and a lot of those guys started to move around. So I know a little bit of NFL history. And then, as I was watching all the NFL drafts of 2000 and 01 and 05 and all that stuff, the buzz for everybody was this is a West Coast offense. This is a West Coast offense. Seattle, West Coast offense. Michael Vick's going to the West Coast offense. It took the league 15 years to be let's all run the same stuff Montana did. And it didn't work exactly the same. But at the time when every defense was built to stop the run and stop deep passes, and the Niners are, hitting everything underneath, it was okay, it's just a completely different game. So the quick perspective I wanted to show. 7-step drops, take out screens, last year in the NFL. Only a handful of quarterbacks completed over 60% of their passes. So that was Matt Ryan, believe it or not, Justin Herbert, Tua, and Matthew Stafford, and Andy Dalton. Josh Allen was at 59% and about 9.7 yards per attempt. Tom Brady's next at 59%. So a lot of the NFL quarterbacks today, if you just said 7-step drop every time, they're going to have these high 50s, low 60s completion percentages, which is what Elway was for a big chunk of his career. Mm-hmm. Just one number to just throw it out there and say, you can't just look at Elway's stats and say, well, he wasn't that good. Now, there are a contingent of people who compare Elway to his peers and all that stuff, and the stats they're not great, but I think there was a lot of the Josh Allen to him.
Well, there's also a lot of,
special.
Some of his peers were players that were pioneering that West Coast offense with the shorter.
Right. It's tough to compare him to Montana
right.
or Steve Young in the early 90s and all. It's tough to compare him to those guys.
Yeah.
Favre. I think Elway was great. So I do have Pro Football References by team, approximate value numbers. So I do have a little bit of a cheat sheet here just to get you some of the best players. You could give him Tom Nalen at center.
You want to give him Tom Nalen?
Not over Elway.
Yeah.
But I would take Elway over Russell Wilson, I guess.
Yeah. Wilson I don't think qualifies.
All right, we're spending a lot of time on the
for
Broncos.
multiple reasons. Anyway, Kansas City
Chiefs. Who you got?
Derek Thomas. is the answer.
Yeah.
You could make a case for a guy like Bobby Bell, but Derek Thomas is one of the best pass rushers in NFL history. I think would be better in today's NFL than he was in his NFL. That would be phenomenal. Imagine Derek Thomas lining up next to Chris Jones with whatever they're able to produce out of the other guys in that defensive line. Like, that duo would be nuts.
Do you want to hear the career AV leaders for the Chiefs?
Yeah.
Will Shields, right guard. Len Dawson, Tim Tyrer, left tackle in the 60s and early 70s.
Okay.
Bobby Bell,
There you
60s
go.
and 70s.
One of my guys.
And Derek Thomas, followed by Buck Buchanan, who you did grade and was a legend.
Based off that
Bowl
one game, Super Bowl I, Buck Buchanan is massively overrated. Now, it's possible he was not overrated in other games he played. But based off that one game.
You're also going to stick to that, too, the rest of your life. Buck Buchanan, overrated.
Yeah.
What if we gave him Tony Gonzalez?
That'd be interesting.
What if he had Tony Gonzalez
and Kelsey
and Travis Kelce on the same team for the Chiefs? Travis Kelce currently 13th in career AV, and Patrick Mahomes 18th, right behind Tamba Ali. I think Mahomes will be number one by the end of it. So yeah, I think Derek Thomas is definitely the play there for the Chiefs. I agree.
You could potentially, they had, other Willie Lanier at linebacker would be an interesting guy to add to them. Any of the offensive linemen that you talked about, Will Shields, there's guys you could add, but I think Derek Thomas is the absolute answer there.
All right, let's go Raiders.
Raiders is tough. You could go in a bunch of different directions there. I gave them Gene Upshaw, former offensive guard, way back in the day before he became NFLPA president, right, or whatever the top gig is there, what it's called.
See, this is why. Tell me about Gene Upshaw's game.
Gene Upshaw was fascinating. That guy. So for a couple of years, Gene Upshaw broke his thumb or something. Played with a cast. Had his whole arm put in a cast. The hand and then the thumb. So it was like a little L shape of cast. And he would get the hook, would get the L, and he would jab people under the helmet, get them in the neck with the hook, right? And then it suddenly dawned on officials that he'd been wearing a cast for a year and a half. They were like, hang on, you broke your thumb back 2 years ago. You can't possibly still need a cast for this. And they made him take it off. But he'd been, for a couple of years, using this thing as a weapon. They're like, so I'm all on board.
70s football was
now, I don't know
special.
if that works in today's NFL. But that's the kind of nasty streak I want in offensive
Gene
lineman.
Upshaw with a cast.
Gene Upshaw with a nasty streak to my offensive line.
So I was thinking Howie Long, and I was also thinking Charles Woodson.
Howie Long was on my list. Woodson wasn't, though. I had Scrabble on there. Nnamdi Asomugha.
No, I think I would take Woodson. In this division where I don't think they have great corners, I would get. I don't think Nnamdi was as good as Woodson.
Now, here's a question. Bo Jackson. Because you got to assume you're getting healthy Bo.
There's so much fun in the running back.
You got to assume also you're getting healthy Bo Jackson. So we're getting Bo for a career. We're not getting Bo for the couple of years before his hip gets shot to hell.
I would think about Bo.
The guy, the one mythical 4.1940 or whatever it was he ran at 200 plus pounds, the greatest athlete to ever suit it up in the NFL, arguably. Adding Bo Jackson to any offense in the NFL, but to the Raiders this year would be fun.
Oh man, Bo! Look at his Pro Football Reference page is out of this world. He did average 5.4 yards per carry in his 4 years. He had long runs. His longest run in 1987 was 91 yards. That was the famous Seahawks one, right? With was that the one the Seahawks won with the Boz?
The Boz was where he ran over him at the goal line one time.
Yeah, Boz was on the team where
ruined Boz's career.
Where Bo ran into the tunnel. Anyway, he had a long of 91 in 87, a long of 92 in 1989, and a long of 88 in 1990. He finished with 515 career carries.
Yeah.
That's it.
Not much.
But he was averaging 5.4 yards a pop. Back then,
yes,
8-man boxes and all that stuff. He put Bo in space.
We had this argument, right, with Bijan Robinson. Bijan Robinson is potentially special enough that it breaks the rules about what you do with running backs and how high you draft those guys and what's more valuable to an offense and blah, blah, blah. By extension, Bo Jackson might be the most special running back to ever enter the league from an athletic talent standpoint, all those kinds of things. I want to break the rule and kind of put him in there.
That's fine. You can only choose one, and you chose.
I did choose Gene
Upshaw in his
hook
cast.
Yeah,
hook cast. I was going to go Woodson here.
Okay,
because we got to beat the Chiefs.
Howie Long would be pretty good as well. Like Howie Long opposite Max Crosby. That's pretty nasty defensive end duo.
Bo Jackson and Marcus Allen were in the same backfield for the Raiders. How about that?
Backfield, you say?
Yeah. You notice I didn't put Jeff Hostetler in there too?
No. Well, that would be
the backfield of Bo Jackson, Marcus Allen, and Jeff Hostetler was really incredible.
Chargers.
Junior Seau?
Oh, okay. I didn't have him on my list, but it's a good one.
My first instinct was Kellen Winslow, actually.
That's who I got.
Yeah, Kellen Winslow worked in the middle of the field with the receivers that they have.
All three of mine, in fact, are offensive players. Kellen Winslow, Antonio Gates, bring him back, or Charlie Joyner, wide receiver.
Big. He was tall, right?
He was tall, right? That's the level of insight you're bringing here.
Yeah. I mean, catch radius. Catch radius guy is what I'm looking for.
I see. Yeah, at 5'11". Yeah?
He had a good catch radius, though.
Good 5'11", 188.
Highest AV, it's got to be, it's Rivers. Phillip Rivers, then Junior Seau.
Yeah.
Then Dan Fouts.
Seau's a good call. I hadn't really considered Seau that much. I was lost down this rabbit hole of offensive playmakers. But
what about LaDainian Tomlinson?
I wouldn't make an argument for Tomlinson.
In this offense?
I mean, he'd be great, but I wouldn't want him over Kellen Winslow or, like a legit receiving weapon.
Yeah, I would want Winslow. He was kind of a game-changing tight end in the Dan Fouts era.
He was like the original, maybe not the original, but he was one of these pioneering, elite receiving threat pass game tight ends in the time where that wasn't really a thing.
Kellen Winslow led the league in receptions as a tight end, 1980 and 1981. 89 catches in 80, 88 catches in 81. He only started 11 games in 1980, though, out of the 16. Because game starts are the dumbest stat in the NFL.
When did the league go from 12 to 16?
77, 78.
Okay.
Right in that range. All right. So we're taking, I think we both agree, Winslow there.
Yep.
So let's go AFC South. So what do you do for the Houston Texans don't have are we taking Texans legends?
Yes. So this is easy because there's only two of them.
What do you got?
Well, it's either Andre Johnson or J.J. Watt. Which one do you want to add?
J.J. doesn't count.
Doesn't he? Wait, so he recently retired.
You literally just made the rules.
Yeah. He recently retired, which would generally rule him out, but he hasn't played for the Texans for a little bit.
Yeah, whatever.
Also, you have to bend the rules a little bit when there's literally only two team legends ever.
21-year history.
Yeah.
For the Texans.
So you don't have a lot to work with here.
I'd give him Andre. I'd give him either one.
Andre
Johnson, probably the better.
J.J. Watt is the better player, but Andre Johnson is probably, not the more acute need, I guess. But when we look at that roster and you're like, you just drafted your quarterback of the future, C.J. Stroud, what did you do to help him from a wide receiver standpoint? And the answer to that is less than maybe you would have liked to because you traded everything for Will Anderson, Yeah. So instead, why don't we give him Andre Johnson? So now that he's got Andre Johnson, in addition to Nico Collins, John Mechie, Xavier Hutchinson,
J.J. Watt and Will Anderson would be a nice little defensive line.
Robert Woods, Tank Dell.
So Texans fixed.
Which one do we give him?
I would lean Watt, but I understand the argument for Andre Johnson.
I lent Andre Johnson, but those are your two options.
Keeping track of these.
Those are your two choices.
We don't have to keep track. Colts.
This one's interesting.
It's Peyton Manning.
Well, so it is. Like, Peyton Manning is obviously the best player they've ever had.
Or Johnny Unitas.
But if you're talking like they've got a plan, right? They just spent the number 4 overall pick on Anthony Richardson. They're planning on this, run-heavy offense where we have the quarterback of the future. Do you immediately junk all that just because you can now dive into the well and get Peyton Manning? No. Or do you say, for the current team, with their plan, let's give him Dwight Freeney?
No. The plan, who cares about the plan?
They do. They just got a plan.
The plan's better if it's Peyton Manning.
Also, by the way, their current approach of let's get the greatest athletes humanity's ever seen, Manning doesn't fit that.
No, he doesn't.
Can't have that.
Who would in their list here?
Freeney.
Most valuable Colts, Peyton Manning, Marvin Harrison, Reggie Wayne, Jeff Saturday.
Yeah.
How about that crew?
Jim Parker, 9-time All-Pro at offensive tackle. Helps the offensive line.
Tell me about
there.
Jim Parker's game.
Don't have a lot of info on Jim Parker other than the 9-time All-Pro thing. That's pretty significant. It's quite a lot of all pros.
Look at you citing all pros
on the offensive line.
You've changed. Edgerrin James in that backfield?
Part of the voting process now. Therefore, I assume it was sound back in the 19...
Is Marshall Faulk a Colt or a
50s.
Ram? Marshall Faulk was really good with the Colts. And
I would say he's one of those guys that qualifies for both.
Marshall Faulk or Edgerrin James in the backfield with Anthony Richardson and Jonathan Taylor?
Nah, they already have Jonathan Taylor. Like, I'm not...
I mean, Peyton Manning's the easy one here.
Peyton Manning is, but like I say, I generally am not giving a quarterback to a team that just drafted one of the top 5.
So this is happening post-draft?
Yes. And well, it was in my head when I did it.
Dwight Freeney would be fun. You finally have that elite pass rusher that they've been chasing.
Jim Parker, also part of the 1950s All-Decade team, the NFL 75th anniversary team, and the 100th anniversary team.
Well, the resume is impeccable.
That's what I'm saying. Can't argue with that.
All
also,
right.
a Outland Trophy winner.
It's time for my specialty here.
And a unanimous All-American in 1956.
I would still give him Peyton Manning. But, yeah, if you want to give him Dwight Freeney, go for it. My specialty here, the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Yes. So there's one
Mark
name.
Brunell.
What? You can't give him Mark Brunell?
How many playoff wins does Trevor Lawrence have? How many AFC championships has he gone to? Mark Brunell, man.
Jimmy Smith.
Mark Brunell. Look at how many AV points or whatever, however you say this stat.
Yeah.
What's Trevor Lawrence's AV? Not as high as Brunell's.
Yeah. Jimmy Smith is the answer.
Jimmy Smith is the answer.
The only viable answer. What are your alternatives? Give me some more names.
Tony Baselli.
Okay.
So Baselli only had basically like a 6-year career.
Yeah.
95 to 01.
So you would see, okay,
for the Jags. I think he was hurt in 01.
If we work on healthy Baselli.
Yeah, healthy Tony Baselli could come in and take Cam Robinson's spot at left tackle. Jimmy Smith.
Yes.
It was him and Keenan McCardle for years. It was kind of like Stephon Diggs and Adam Thielen or whatever 1-2 punch you want to say, where there was points where it looked like, either one could be better, and then Jimmy Smith just kind of like took off. And Jimmy Smith we found out he was kind of QB proof too. When rookie Byron Leftwich was kind of finding his way, Jimmy Smith was still producing for a few years with the young Byron Leftwich. Jimmy Smith is as good as Marvin Harrison, but as much as I love Mark Brunell,
spicy take.
Brunell is not the high volume. He's not as good as Peyton Manning.
No,
he's not. He was a high volume passer early in his career, but not so much toward the end of his Jags run. And then Jimmy Smith had Byron Leftwich as his quarterback. Jimmy Smith was there was a point where he was right there with Marvin Harrison as the best high volume receiver in the NFL. Now you could argue Randy Moss was the best deep threat at the time and all that stuff, but Jimmy Smith is as good as Marvin Harrison. They should both be in the Hall of Fame. And so Jimmy Smith would be the guy. Give him to Trevor Lawrence, and he dominates.
Yeah, no, I think that's probably true. I can't see a particularly good alternative to Jimmy Smith. He's the answer, I think, for them.
The healthy Tony Brackens, too, really underrated.
Healthy Tony Brackens.
There was a few-year stretch, I'm telling you. If we had Tony Brackens grading, he'd be a 90-plus edge defender for about 3 years.
Okay. The other couple of guys, that interior duo, Henderson and Stroud.
Yeah, so Stroud's interesting because he was a little, the couple of years we had of grading 06 to 08 with the Jags, or 06, 07, grading was underwhelming. And, I watch a lot of old Jags games. He's all right. Henderson was a better player.
Yeah.
Very good run defender. Neither of those guys are making the cut here, though.
Plus you get to bring back the meme of the guy slapping him.
Yes, you always bring that back.
Right.
All right, so Jimmy Smith's for the Jags. Tennessee Titans, a.k.a. the Houston Oilers.
Oh, yeah.
Did you go back to the Oilers at least? Or did you just go Titans?
No. I mean, they have an obvious answer as well, in my opinion. Bruce Matthews is the answer there.
Yeah, but he was never a
Clone him 4 times, and you have an entire new offensive line.
Wait, he was a Titan. Was he a Titan?
He might have.
He played till 01?
Yeah, he really hung in there.
Jeez, man. He played from 83 to 01.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was with the Titans for 5 years.
There's a reason we named our offensive line award after him.
They were the Tennessee Oilers.
For like a year,
For 97 and 98, I believe. Is that right? And then 99, I think they moved to the Titans, and that was the year they had the Miracle.
Yeah.
Music City Miracle. Yeah, Bruce Matthews. You play him at center or guard?
I mean,
or tackle.
Anywhere.
Play anywhere.
But find your weakest, like literally. So what you do is you take Bruce Matthews, you have him chill for the first week of training camp, just like rest up, get a massage, hang, whatever. You identify the worst starter on your offensive line, and then that's where Bruce plays.
Plug him right in.
Yeah.
All right.
So for people that don't know, Bruce Matthews played, I think, all 5 positions along the offensive line at various points in his NFL career and did them well. 7-time All-Pro, like the 14 times All-Pro, member of the 100th anniversary all-time team, arguably the greatest offensive lineman the game has ever seen. The Titans have a bad offensive line. Put those two things together, you have an improvement.
If Pro Football Reference is correct, they had him start his career at right guard. The next year, he was center/right tackle. Yeah. So he's got full years at right tackle in 84 and 85. In 86, he was a left tackle.
Yeah.
And then he had a 4-year stretch at right guard, a 4-year stretch at center, and then a 5-year stretch at left guard, and then finished his career at center.
And I believe he also...
That's hilarious.
I believe he also long snapped.
Really?
Yeah. He did literally everything.
There's not enough of those guys
along
in the
the
NFL.
Offensive line.
There is not. Just talk about stealing roster spots. Right?
Well, that's what I'm saying. You need to clone him 4 times, and then you just have an entire new offensive line.
Man, that Matthews family. Football legends. Yeah, Bruce Matthews is the answer. The other most valuable Oilers/Titans using approximate value at Pro Football Reference, Mike Munchak, Warren Moon, Steve McNair, and Ray Childress.
You could bring Earl Campbell back and have a Thunder and Thunder backfield.
I was thinking about Earl Campbell. Another guy.
Dude, imagine,
very short career.
Imagine the fourth quarter having spent the first 3 quarters tackling a combination of Derrick Henry and Earl Campbell.
Earl Campbell was 5'11", 232 at a time when offensive linemen were probably 280.
Max.
And defensive linemen were 240.
Just think about 5'11", 232.
Yeah, this is like Cam Newton being a 260-pound
Earl Campbell
quarterback,
had
basically.
like the Quadzilla thing. I mean, that's Earl Campbell back in the day. That dude looked like a nightmare to try and tackle.
Man, third year had 1,900 yards in 15 games. As a 25-year-old running back.
How many times do you think, and let's assume you would survive each of these hits, but how many times do you think it would take you to tackle Earl Campbell one-on-one?
How many times?
Yeah, like if you just set up right in a channel and he got to run over you each time, how many attempts, assuming you were like back to 100% after each one?
I would never tackle him.
How many shots before you ever got him on the ground?
That's like asking, can my 7-year-old tackle me once? If I choose to not be tackled by my 7-year-old, I will not be tackled.
You outweigh him by
doesn't matter.
50 pounds.
No. I mean, we did play a tackle football game one time.
Like, I think I'd eventually get him, but it might take 100 shots at it.
I'm going to say I'm a poor tackler.
Yeah.
I had a good tackle against a D3 fullback one time in a pickup tackle football
That's
game.
what I'm saying. You're a big fella.
Division III fullback, probably weighed about 230.
I mean, look, if
we're talking about Earl Campbell here, man.
If nothing else, at some point he's going to trip over your prone corpse and you'll take him to the ground. That counts as a tackle, right? So you're going to get him eventually. Question is, how long would it take?
I would never tackle Earl Campbell.
Never tackle. Okay, fine.
That's my final answer. All right, AFC North. Let's go Baltimore Ravens.
Okay.
Now,
I did not give them former Baltimore Colts players, or in fact, former Cleveland Browns
franchise.
My interest in the Baltimore Ravens started with the relocation and the origin of the Baltimore Ravens.
Starts from since 1996.
Yes,
Ravens.
Which, to be fair, still gives them an absolute crapload of really good players that they could use right now. So it's not like you need to dive back into the Browns or Colts days.
Now, how does Pro Football Reference handle the Ravens? Okay, yeah, they're only going with the Ravens since 06. Mm-hmm. I mean, 96. 96. Yeah. So Ray Lewis.
Ray Lewis.
Is the obvious answer. You didn't go Ray Lewis?
No. Ed Reed.
Ed Reed
is the obvious answer.
Yeah. You're a big Ed Reed guy.
Ed Reed. And I think I would be more interested in giving them Chris McAllister than Ray Lewis.
Oh, you're a positional value guy.
I mean, not exclusively, but I think when you pair positional value, how good Chris McAllister was, how good he would be in today's NFL, I think all that points you in that direction more than Ray Lewis.
Interesting franchise. I mean, they know Jarrett Johnson on the list.
Jarrett Johnson.
Jarrett Johnson was one of those, I don't even know what his sack totals were, but one of those guys that early PFF identified as like, hey, this guy's a little better than you think.
Yeah.
Against the run,
rushing
hard edge. That's a hard edge.
You also get Jonathan Ogden. I mean, I didn't put him there. But
well, you already have Ronnie Stanley.
Sure.
On the current Ravens roster.
You do, but there's a world where you're like, I mean, Jonathan Ogden's here. Like,
yeah, but if you're trying to
thanks
upgrade.
For your service, Ronnie, but,
But Stanley's one of the best right now. Ed Reed immediately upgrades your free safety situation. Ray Lewis gets to play next to Roquan Smith.
Yeah.
Right? I know they just drafted Trenton Simpson.
Yeah.
To be the heir apparent
Probably not
eventually for
stopping you
Patrick Queen.
In that world of, this guy's not stopping me drafting a first-round player, Trenton Simpson's probably not stopping you drafting Ray Lewis.
Plus, Ray Lewis, right, finishes his career in 2012, and he's not even that good at that point. He's barely playing, and he's just like, guys, I'm retiring. Win a Super Bowl for me. And he thought it was going to work. He's a little self-centered. He revolves a lot of his speeches around Ray Lewis. That's what Ray Lewis does.
Yeah.
And that should never work. And then it worked.
Yeah.
Like his speech willed Joe Flacco from almost getting benched halfway through the season to going on one of the best Super Bowl runs of all time. I want Ray Lewis on my team. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you can't argue with being a good locker room presence.
Yeah, locker room guy.
Plus, you've got to get back in his good books, having made some vaguely disparaging remarks about him in intros and things.
So I'm absolutely going with the Ray Lewis there.
Gotcha. All right.
Cincinnati Bengals.
This one was fascinating. You can go in a bunch of different directions with the Bengals. Geno Atkins being put back on this team now would be pretty fascinating, given how good he was in his prime. Willie Anderson solves your right tackle problem with arguably the greatest right tackle of all time. Ken Riley as a cornerback option. Bobby Williams, one of the best guards during his time. I think you go to a lot of places with Cincinnati. Obviously, by the way, we're assuming you would take Chris Collinsworth, but he's ineligible through being, it's a conflict of interest.
Yeah, Chris Collinsworth. Mm-hmm. I would definitely take Chris.
Right. Elite deep threat at wide receiver.
When career approximate value for the Bengals, number 21 is Carson Palmer. Number 22 is Chris Collinsworth. Career approximate value. Bengals history.
Yeah.
You didn't even mention the great Anthony Munoz.
I didn't.
I don't care. Just take Orlando Brown, flip him back to the right side.
He doesn't want to play right side.
Don't care.
He very doesn't want to play right side. He's very insistent about that.
It's a very simple conversation. I'm going to go to Orlando Brown, look him eye to eye, because I can do that.
That's true, you could.
And tell him, we're bringing Anthony Munoz back.
But
the 1985 version.
But why don't you avoid the headache and simply take Willie Anderson and let everybody stay where they're happy?
Look, I like Willie. He was in studio during this offseason. He's a big man.
Yeah.
Great guy. He's not Anthony Munoz. We know that.
Do we?
No, we don't.
What if he's right-sided Anthony Munoz?
He might not be. I don't know. We don't have the grades.
That's what I'm saying.
We have a couple grades of Willie Anderson, a couple years of grades. He was
great.
They were very good.
So you could take...
I saw Munoz getting whooped by Bruce Smith in some of those 88 games.
All right.
Games in 88. But Munoz has better reputation. You cite his all-pros. Cite the all-pros. You've been doing that for everyone else.
Well, he gets screwed by all-pros because the league didn't know what they were doing with right tackle, left tackle.
I'm talking about Munoz. 1, 2,
but
3,
Willie.
4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 all-pros.
But Willie Anderson gets hosed when you just look at all-pros because the league just gave him all the left tackles.
Munoz has 7 catches in his career, 4 touchdowns.
Right.
So red zone weapon for Joe Burrow. Going Anthony Munoz.
Willie, despite playing right tackle, has 4 first or second team all-pros.
Oh yeah, he got screwed.
That's ridiculous.
Our founder, Neil, so we were helping Willie Anderson with his Hall of Fame case, just putting some data together for him. And Neil's research came up that when he looked at right tackle all-pros, it was all based off a record.
Yeah.
Who was the guy for the Bears? The 01, the Bears go 12-4. And whoever their right tackle was got all-pro for the only time in his career. I forget who it was. So yeah, Willie Anderson did probably get screwed. I'm still going Munoz. Kicking Orlando Brown over to the right side.
That's just asking.
Geno Atkins is interesting, though.
That's just asking for an unhappy locker room. I'm not doing that.
Munoz over Whitworth, though, right? Or are you like, no, who knows?
I don't know, but
maybe
I
Whitworth
probably would default to Munoz over Whitworth.
The league's not that dumb. All right,
also, by the way,
Cleveland Browns in their entire history.
Imagine a world where Whitworth plays guard like he was supposed to.
That's a good point. Then you can
where are we
shore
going?
up that offensive line. Cleveland Browns.
I added Joe Thomas back to this roster. It's the weakest spot on that offensive line. You add maybe the best left tackle of all time to that. That's a pretty good upgrade. I think you can make a case for Paul Warfield, the wide receiver, or Clay Matthews Jr.
Clay Matthews Jr. by approximate value is the most valuable Brown of all time.
Sack artist.
Would you go Jim Brown?
No.
You already have Nick Chubb?
Correct.
I mean, Jim Brown could be that much better than Nick Chubb. Just like you said, Jonathan Ogden versus Ronnie Stanley. Same argument.
I can imagine a world where Jim Brown is not any better than Nick Chubb. He was just playing in a day where offensive linemen weigh 230 pounds.
You started this whole...
Right, but he already weighed like 230. You can't like scale him up. What is he now, 275? Like that doesn't... He was already a super freak just back in the 1960s.
Christian Okoye size.
Yeah, so I don't think that works. I don't think you can say, all right, with the benefit of modern sports nutrition and medicine and all those things, Jim Brown is now a 275-pound dude that runs a 4.240 and is therefore unstoppable. Yet, I mean, there's got to be a limit to it, right?
I don't know, man.
Or like, because if that's our argument, that scaled up proportional to everybody else, he's now an unstoppable superhuman. Then okay,
I'm just posing the question, Jim Brown. You want to adjust Don Hudson for era? I mean, Jim Brown was faster than everybody too, right? And bigger and stronger than everybody.
Yeah, but
so the speed would translate. I mean, he was Bo Jackson. You were making this Bo Jackson.
I don't think he was
Bo Jackson.
I don't think he was Bo Jackson from an athleticism standpoint. I think he was Bo Jackson from a size standpoint, and that was a bigger deal back when he played.
Gotta apologize. I'm not completely familiar with his game, other than some highlights. Got it.
I don't know.
Joe Thomas is fair though.
To me, I just don't
replace Jedrick Wills with Joe Thomas right now.
Like I think Jim Brown was a great running back, but I think a lot of what he did was built off simply being way bigger than a lot of people trying to stop him. And I don't know that you can translate that. Plus, right, as I say, we already have Nick Chubb, whereas our left tackle is Jedrick Wills, and I can upgrade him with Joe Thomas.
Sold. All right, the rich history of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Who are you pulling from the Steelers?
This is why you got to go back further than the 1980s, because you want Mean Joe Green.
Mean Joe Green, huh?
Yeah.
The fourth most valuable Steeler of all time.
An absolute one-man wrecking crew on the inside, albeit on an amazing steel curtain defensive line.
So I was thinking, so that's great. The most valuable Steelers of all time.
Also, by the way, phenomenal nickname. Nicknames are going to be big in my...
What?
Yeah,
just mean.
All together.
Mean Joe.
You got to, like, Mean Joe Green. Just rolls off the tongue. You got to add a Mean Joe Green to your roster whenever you got the opportunity to.
Was he the best player on the steel curtain?
Yes.
Ben Roethlisberger, Mike Webster, the center, Jack Ham, Mean Joe Green, Terry Bradshaw.
They've got a lot of defensive players would be interesting. Jack Ham would be pretty fascinating.
Jack Lambert.
Right. Either of those guys would be pretty intriguing. Troy Polamalu. Next to Minka.
So I was going to suggest the two centers, right? They had this run of Mike Webster and rolled right into Dermontti Dawson.
Uh-huh.
And we don't have grades on either of them. But by all accounts, Mike Webster was like the dude at center in the 70s and 80s. He retires in 1988. Dermontti Dawson takes over in 88. He goes till 2000. I think they are the reason why everybody thought Marquise Pouncey was a future Hall of Famer for the Steelers, because that's just what the Steelers do at center. So I was going to say plug one of those guys into the Steelers offensive line today.
The other argument, I think, that would have a really good one is Mel Blount at cornerback.
Oh, that'd be great.
Mel Blount was so dominated, they literally changed the game because he was just bullying receivers. Like, they created this rule, essentially.
11 interceptions in 1975.
Right. The Mel Blount rule was effectively what he created. Like, he was so dominant physically that they had to scale back the level of contact that DBs were allowed to have on receivers. He was a Defensive Player of the Year in 1975. Led the NFL that year. That was the interceptions year. Member of the All-Decade team, the 75th and the 100th anniversary team, and a whole bunch of other crap. Like, arguably the greatest corner ever.
I'm good with Mean Joe Green as the option here.
Okay.
But I was considering the centers. Mel Blount.
I don't think I would add a center. I would be Mean Joe Green. I would think a lot about Mel Blount. And then one of those freaky defensive players, whether it's Polamalu or one of the linebackers, Lambert or Ham.
All right, let's go to the Buffalo Bills. Going through the AFC East now.
Yeah. So this one I thought was tough enough. I think you go a bunch of different directions.
It's got to be Bruce Smith.
Yeah, Bruce Smith was where I settled on. What does he play in today's NFL and that defense specifically? What is his alignment and how do you deploy him?
I think he's what Aaron Donald is doing.
Really?
I think he's a 3 that lines up as a 5 and an edge when you want him to. Or is he just Cameron Jordan? which is a 280-pound edge.
Because we have a very different body type than Aaron Donald.
That's what Bruce Smith was really an edge defender.
Yes.
Who I think was forced into 5 technique toward the end of his career.
Yeah.
Like he was with Wade Phillips in their old school 3-4 in 1996.
And when it's important that we remember, like he was another like Bruce Matthews. He was the first overall pick of the 1985 draft, but was still kicking around playing for the first few years of the 2000s.
It's amazing. He was 40 years old on Washington. When I was watching one of those old drafts, there was a point. I don't even know if they ever saw the field together, but there was a point where Bruce Smith, Darryl Green, another legend, and Deion Sanders, were all on the same. They were all rostered together in Washington, like 3 first ballot Hall of Famers, some of the best players of all time at their respective positions. Now they were all in their late 30s or whatever. I mean, Deion, whatever, he was in his 30s. They're all at the end of their careers, but crazy.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Bruce Smith, very durable,
listed at 6'4",
dominant.
262. Now he definitely got heavier than that towards the end.
Yeah, I think so.
But
I think he's probably a pure edge that you could kick inside. So I'd say that.
So he was
him and Von Miller though rushing off.
Yeah,
the
he
edge
was
for the
kind
Bills.
of like this prototypical, like 3-4 end for various stages of his career. But in this world of like adjusted for inflation, transported into the modern day, I wonder if you just say, like, just maximize your body type for 4-3 edge rusher, like pure edge rush. Take advantage of that. We're talking about the all-time sack leader in NFL history, the only guy, right, over 200.
Exactly 200 career sacks.
Yeah, and okay, he hung around a long time to get there, but we're talking about one of the best pass rushers in NFL history.
Came out of Virginia Tech before they were any good, really. I told you I was kind of watching this 1988 Bills-Bengals game, just kind of glancing at it. He had some reps against Anthony Munoz where he just completely wrecked him. I don't even know if they ended up as sacks. Maybe one of them did. But Bruce Smith and Reggie White, I believe, from what I've seen, look like the guys who would grade at Aaron Donald type of level,
like
J.J. Watt type of
would.
level. I think Bruce Smith definitely would, from what I've seen with Bruce Smith. But Tony Baselli, though, shut him down in that game in 96.
Couple of offensive line options for Buffalo you could have. Reuben Brown, guard. Joel Delamure, I think that's how that's said. Guard. A couple of interior linemen to help really upgrade that group. But you could go with the Jim Kelly's favorite receiver, whose name is just falling out of my head.
Andre Reed?
Yeah, Andre Reed to come in and finally
Andre
be that
Reed and
secondary.
Stephon Diggs would be good.
Right.
What about O.J. Simpson in the backfield with Josh Allen?
Look at you. Why are you bringing running backs to every team?
Because running backs were fun back then, and
But it's 2023.
I don't know. They feel like they'd be better because they were good back then.
I see. Okay.
Fred Smirlis is a New England legend. He would do.
Okay, that's the first one. I don't know who that is.
Fred Smirlis was a nose tackle for the Bills and then the Patriots.
Okay.
And he was a radio legend. So Zach Diossi, my buddy Zach, Giants long snapper. His dad Steve was long snapper / linebacker for New England, and Diossi and Smirlis did New England radio together, and then opened a steakhouse together. They were like best buds.
Of course.
But Smirlis was like, when he was on the radio, all he'd talk about was two-gapping. He'd be like, "Oh, Belichick loves two-gap." He just loved talking ball. But he was a nose tackle in the '80s, and the Bills need a run stopper.
They do.
Right? So that could be a good fit there as well.
Okay.
But I'm not taking him over Bruce Smith.
No.
All right. Dolphins are up next.
Oh, this one's obvious, I think. It's Marino.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dan Marino.
I want, a lot like Elway.
Tuanon might be after you here.
I want Dan Marino in the modern NFL. I just want that data point. I want to see how that works.
Wait. I'm going to do... I was going to do some, here's Dan Marino's stats through 3 seasons compared to Tua's.
Dan Marino is the guy.
That actually won't work. It usually works, across eras where the legend looks bad.
No, he'll look great.
But Marino will look great.
Year 2 was 84.
Touchdowns.
Yeah.
He had more touchdowns in 84 than Tua had in his first 3 seasons.
Right. The Dan Marino, to me, is the poster child for the guy that would not necessarily... I have no idea what his scores are in either of these two things, but I suspect Dan Marino would have a low Wonderlic score and a high S2 cognition score. I feel like that guy just understood how the game worked from an intuitive level, his brain just worked on the football field to the exclusion of everything else. Like, all of his run time was dedicated to just finding an open dude and firing a ball right at his face, and everything else throughout, like, was out the window. Whereas you, like, 80% of your brain is dedicated to 1980s wrestling and baseball stats. With Dan, almost all of it, like 100%, is just laser focused on finding Mark Clayton and hitting him with the ball.
Yeah. I could buy that. Yeah. Marino's stats are silly.
They're ridiculous.
Right? Like, so a lot of people focus on the touchdowns and all that stuff. So he rolls into the league in 83. It's pretty good as a rookie. Very good. I mean, he's very good as a rookie. But his second year still might be the best quarterback season of all time. Over 5,000 yards in a completely different era. 48 touchdowns, completely different era. I mean, that thing stood for a while.
Just taking those two beats there, right?
Yeah.
5,000 yards and 48 touchdowns. Those are crazy numbers now. To do that in 1984 when, it's a different game going back to 2007. 1984 is a whole other world, and he's carving teams up for 5,000 yards and almost 50 touchdowns.
Yeah, and he averaged 9 yards per attempt that year.
Yeah.
9, and he played every game. Miami goes 14-2. They lose in the Super Bowl to San Francisco. That's the biggest challenge there is Marino getting over that hump.
The two greatest outlier seasons of all time are that year and the year Joe Namath went over 4,000 yards, which is still the only time a New York Jets quarterback has done that.
That is actually
in
crazy.
The 60s.
The other thing I wanted to highlight about Marino, though, the more we kind of knew this intuitively, but we studied it more, and it's like, man, the quarterback, like, it's not about the offensive line when it comes to sack rate and all that stuff. Marino led the league in sack rate his first 7 years in the league.
As in the lowest.
The lowest. Yes, the lowest sack rate. The craziest number, he had how many games? It was like 19 games or something where he didn't get sacked in a row. He was sacked only 6 times in 1988.
Yeah.
In a world where there are 7-step drops all the time. 6 times. And he played all 16 games. Now, they went 6-10 or whatever, but he threw for over 4,000 yards and lost only 31 yards on 6 sacks that particular season. That is nuts.
The only thing that would give me pause for concern, and it's still like you'd have to take this risk, is Dan Marino played effectively before the era of disguise coverages and deliberate bait and switch moves by a defense. Like, he got out of the league right as Dick LeBeau's Blitzburgh type of defense was coming around to being a big thing. And I read a very compelling argument at one stage that I think there was a brief crossover and he played them a couple of times maybe. You know the way Russell Wilson played that Brandon Staley defense and just kept pitching the ball to DBs. You couldn't handle the idea that they were taking away the one thing he wanted to do.
But you just said he was Mr. S2 cognition.
No, I know. But in a world where everybody, like, you see it stays the same, you know? You see the thing, it stays the same. You just find the open guy, you hit him. I read a very compelling argument or article at one point that was basically arguing that Dan Marino, in a world of zone blitzes and disguise coverages and showing you one thing pre-snap and another thing post-snap, might have struggled quite a bit. And we never got to see that because he basically bounced from the league at right about the time that was becoming a thing. So there's definitely a possibility that in today's NFL, as much as everyone's like, Dan Marino would throw 7,000 yards and 1 million touchdowns, might not have happened because maybe he actually looks at disguise coverages and just starts throwing the ball to linebackers all the time. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm just saying it's possible.
Marino was pretty special.
Yes.
Overall. Release and arm talent and sack avoidance and all that fun stuff. Maybe he would avoid sacks, or he wouldn't avoid sacks as well. His sack rates did go way up as he got older.
Right.
Durability was hurt. Movement skills weren't as good, and maybe, zone blitz.
Got to mention Dwight Stevenson. Named the
award.
The guy that named the award is named after PFF.
Bring him in at center. Connor Williams moves to left guard. We're solving some problems there for Tua.
That's what I'm saying.
A better problem to solve, though, is Dan Marino.
Yes. Even with the potential risk that he can't handle zone blitz. Fire zone. Dan Marino's just, I don't know. Who knows?
2 more teams. New England Patriots.
New England Patriots.
Who are you bringing in? So I'm looking at the most valuable Patriots of all time. I'm surprised, like the Peyton era Colts. It's the Colts. It's all Peyton and his friends.
Yeah.
The most valuable Patriots of all time only include, of course, Brady, but Logan Mankins, Matt Light, and Vince Wilfork are the only Brady era Patriots in this. Just using AV.
Yeah.
Most valuable.
Matt Light.
Yeah. I mean, the way AV works is a little silly because it's basically like, did you play tackle on a team that was good? And so Tom Brady's the biggest driver for the Patriots being good on offense. So the fact that Matt Light was his left tackle, he gets like a ton of credit for that. That's just how it goes. They're not like grading these players or anything. It's just, were you on the field when teams were good? So that's why Matt Light, because he played 10 years at tackle.
Okay.
But where would you go here?
So I didn't want to give them Brady.
You can't do Brady. That's not in the rules.
I felt like that was against the rules, or at least close enough to it that I didn't want to do that. I thought Gronk might be eligible just because he's a little closer.
Now let's have more fun.
Okay. John Hanna, I think you could bring to the table.
Yep.
Former guard, offensive legend. You ever see pictures of John Hanna? That guy was jacked back in the day. I don't know what the testing rules were like in terms of, hey, pee in a cup, random test.
In the 70s and 80s?
Right. I don't know how good they were back then. I'd be vaguely surprised if John Hanna was regularly passing some advanced medical screening, but who knows? All I'm saying is the dude was jacked out of his mind, and I think would still absolutely crush NFL defensive linemen. I think Randy Moss is eligible. Wasn't there that long, but dude, the years he had,
basically.
Right, but one of them included a 23 touchdown season.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, so I felt like Moss was at least eligible and worth discussing, but I ended up settling on John Hanna.
I was going to suggest Andre Tippett.
Oh, good.
Now, not necessarily because the Patriots need pass rushers or anything, but Tippett was like your old school 3-4 rush backer.
Right.
Had 18.5 sacks one year, 16.5 sacks a different year.
Yep.
Sacks are overrated, but they could tell the story if we don't have PFF data. Tippett, pretty solid tenure. Like when I was growing up, he was the dude in New England during a lot of their bad years as well. Stanley Morgan was a really good receiver for a while. He's no Randy Moss, but it is interesting. Like guys like Teddy Bruschi and Willie McGinnis and Richard Seymour, they're all top 20 most valuable.
Seymour's a good name.
Patriots.
I hadn't considered him. Seymour is a good call.
But Hanna at guard might take Cole Strange's spot though.
Yes, I would think so.
All right, New York Jets. Where are you going?
New York Jets.
Can't take Namath over Aaron Rodgers now.
No, wouldn't do it. Though I do think that him throwing for 4,000 yards in whatever it was, the early 60s is nuts.
The most valuable Jets of all time. Don Maynard.
Yeah.
Larry Grantham.
Maynard's an option.
Mo Lewis.
What?
He's also the most valuable Patriot of all time.
Huh.
He injured Drew Bledsoe.
He did.
Is that why? The door for Tom Brady.
Is that why? Like they're giving him credit for that? He gets 10 years worth of AV.
Yeah, he should get all of his AV goes to all Brady's 282 AV go to
counts to Mo Lewis for starting that.
Joe Namath and then Winston Hill.
Okay, so the two names I had that are not, you didn't look at either of them, I don't think. Mark Gastineau on the defensive line. Just load up. Let's keep going. Let's see how many freak shows we can get on that defensive line for the Jets. And then Darrelle Revis. I mean, dude, Revis and Sauce. I mean,
Revis
sorry,
is the answer.
Sorry,
Revis
DJ.
Is the answer.
You're a good player in your own right, but Darrelle Revis just became available. We're forming the greatest cornerback tandem of all time over here.
I have to say I forget when our friend Mike Tannenbaum got there. There was a lot of team building things that the Jets did. I thought that were good when they went to back-to-back AFC championships and they were trying to challenge the Patriots. But they were for a Rex Ryan defense that relied on corners. They had Darrelle Revis and Antonio Cromartie at one point, right? When you talk like Cromartie, like Sauce Gardner probably ends up being better than Cromartie, but Cromartie is a great ball hawk type of corner to play opposite Revis, who you'd like to avoid. And then they loaded up at receiver with Braylon Edwards and Santonio Holmes. They did some really good things. They just had Mark Sanchez at quarterback. But the Jets kind of built the team the way we would, I think, on the perimeter, being really, really strong. And, Revis is the answer here.
Yes.
He's out of his mind good.
I mean, that 2009 season from Darrelle Revis, ironically, didn't win Defensive Player of the Year that year. That's the greatest coverage season we've seen from any player anywhere, ever.
All right. I think once a year we need to read what that year was.
He gave up a pass rating in the 30s. He gave up a completion rate, I think, in the 30s, and he did it shutting down like a list of really good wide receivers week after week.
Darrelle Revis, 2009. It was 09, right?
Yeah.
Where am I here? Give me the 09 season. Yes, not every team. We have to remind people. Not every team actually plays matchups. Revis did. And in that year, he was like Randy Moss, Steve Smith,
right, and
Andre Johnson.
And tracked them.
Tracked them everywhere.
Including into the slot.
And he was playing man coverage.
Yep.
And when you play man coverage, you usually can get pass breakups. You usually can't get interceptions. Mm-hmm. And so he had 2 interceptions in the playoffs as well. So he finished with 8. But his entire season, passer rating, including the playoffs, was 29.1 when it was man coverage against the very best receivers in the NFL. He gave up just 38% of the passes into his coverage to be completed. 38%. And this wasn't, remember, it's, again, at the same time, Nnamdi Asomugha was in the league playing just right corner and being avoided. He would get targeted once or twice a game. Revis got targeted 127 times that year.
That's crazy.
So it wasn't like, hey, he's just shutting them down. They're not challenging him. It was like, no, I need, Andre Johnson in my offense. I need Steve Smith in my offense. I need all these guys. So I'm going to target them. And it didn't matter. He faced Reggie Wayne, Marvin Harrison. He faced all those guys and shut them all down. And it's one of the best seasons of all time because we actually have data on it. So it targeted 127 times, still only gave up 500 yards into coverage, 24 pass breakups, 8 interceptions. Revis's 09 was out of this world, and Charles Woodson won Defensive Player of the Year because he had better. He had those stats. So it's like a bunch of sacks and a bunch of tackles and a bunch of forced fumbles. And Woodson was unbelievable that year. Actually,
great year, just not as good as Revis.
In a completely different role.
Yeah.
Is that it for the AFC?
Yeah, is that it? Is that all? See, everyone on my list is an NFC team now.
Did we remember the Titans?
We did.
Great.
We gave them Bruce Matthews
Good
5 times.
Fun exercise. Let us know in the comments. Who would you add for your respective teams? I'm sure you've already started typing. So.
And then the NFC tomorrow.
NFC's coming back tomorrow.
NFL podcast at pff.com for any comments and or suggestions for this or for anything else we're doing. Various shows, ideas, all those kinds of things. Fire us an email. We like reading them all.
All right. Well, thanks to everybody for tuning in. We'll see you again tomorrow as we fix every NFC team with some more legends.